This is Rachel Fisher.
Hi, this is Desi Jedeikin.
Today we're going to be talking about John Holmes and the Wonderland Murders.
I'm into it.
Desi's into it because John Holmes has a big cock.
Right. I mean, I'm a simple girl.
For anyone who doesn't know who John Holmes is, he was called the Elvis of Porn. Sometimes he was referred to as the Errol Flynn of porn. The movie Boogie Nights was loosely based off of John Holmes, the John Holmes character. But the real story of John Holmes is actually, in my opinion, crazier than the movie Boogie Nights.
Right.
And this is a true story. We're just going to get right into it. So John Holmes was born John Curtis Estes on August 8th, 1944 in Asheville, Ohio to Mary June Barton and Carl Estes. John was the youngest of four. And his mom, I don't think she was even really married to this guy, Carl Estes, because fucking scandal.
Yeah,
but
he's so fucked up.
No one.
He's a bastard.
He's a fucking bastard. So when John was really little, his mom split from his biological father, and she got with this guy named Edgar Holmes when John was really young. And all the kids, they just changed their last name because this is their new dad, basically.
Right.
What's strange is that Mary and Edgar got married and divorced 3 separate times to each other.
They seem very stable.
I just feel like you're like not supposed to stay, or you're not supposed to get back with an ex-boyfriend. Like, can you imagine getting back with an ex-husband, divorcing them again, and then getting remarried to them?
That is literally the most dramatic type of relationship you can have, where you remarry people more than one time.
Right. It's like, take the hint.
I've never known a love like that.
So Mary, John's mom, was super religious. She was Southern Baptist, so all the kids, they went to church. Edgar, however, was a raging alcoholic.
That's the classic relationship.
Right. The mom's trying to pray away the alcoholism.
Right.
This guy, Edgar, was so bad that he would often come home and sometimes even, like, he would come home drunk all the time, but sometimes he would even barf on the kids.
Wow.
I actually read accounts of that he would barf on the children.
And I bet you John Holmes was barfed on. His dick was barfed on as an adult.
It all comes full circle.
Possible, yeah.
That's the circle of life.
Yeah.
He's like, I've dealt with this before.
It's like the original story of the Lion King.
But with barf dick. So John, obviously, he really liked anytime he got to stay at his grandparents' house. It was a lot more stable over there.
Ugh, I so relate.
Oh my God. Desi, this story is going to have a lot of parallels to
I
both
know,
your life and my life.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Got it. Yeah.
So buckle up, listeners. When John was 4, his mom got divorced from Edgar for the final time, and she got remarried to a man named Harold Bowman.
Damn, how does she fucking find all these guys?
I don't know. They all want to fuck Mary Holmes. So Harold and Mary, they had their own kid, and after they had their own kid, Harold was like, you know what, fuck your other bastard children.
Yep.
I don't want anything to do with them. He was super violent, and he was also a raging alcoholic.
So she's not getting great guys.
Mary's got a bad picker. One time he threw John down a flight of stairs.
Oh.
Yeah, he was not a good guy. So by the time John turned 16, he was like, fuck this, I'm joining the army. He was stationed in Germany for 3 years, and after being honorably discharged, he moved to Los Angeles, where he worked a variety of jobs, including a salesman. He worked at a coffee nips factory, and he was also working as an ambulance driver. And this is where he would meet his wife, Sharon Gabbanini, who was working as a nurse at the time. It was romance during the screaming.
Oh, yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, of course. I mean, nothing brings people together like trauma.
So he married Sharon in 1965, and during their marriage, she had 3 miscarriages, so they just stopped trying to have kids at that point. Sharon was very straight-laced, and John loved her, but he was kind of a little possessive of her, but they had a pretty functional relationship in the start. That would not last, obviously. It would soon become very, very dysfunctional, and Sharon would probably need Al-Anon or a program similar to that, Codependence Anonymous. In the late 60s, John used to like to frequent a poker room in Gardena, which, if you don't know where Gardena is, that's a area just outside the city of Los Angeles. It's still in Los Angeles County. But I've never been to Gardena.
It sounds like a place where car dealerships are.
I think so. If someone's from Gardena, they can write us in and yell at us.
Like, no, it's a lovely community where families are raised.
Well, there was a poker room that John used to frequent there. He really liked gambling. So while he was taking a piss at this poker room in the urinal,
Not in the room.
He didn't go. He didn't go in the room. He was at the urinal, and a guy was taking a piss next to him, and he just glances over and just sees, wow, this monster cock taking a piss next to him, and he can't believe it.
It's like his Lana Turner moment at Schwab's soda shop where he was discovered.
It was, though. This was his moment of discovery.
I like that you have to admit that you were looking.
Right.
Like, but then
Which is a major faux pas.
Right.
You don't
But it's
look.
like, well, I can't help it. I mean, come on.
And that's basically what he said. He's like, pardon me, sir.
Excuse me.
I beg my pardon. I'm sorry to be rude, but your cock is massive.
That's some cock you got there.
It's like Wilbur the pig in Charlotte's Web. Instead of some pig, it's some cock.
Yeah.
Like they write it on the web and the whole
town
sees.
They pissed it onto the wall of the urinal.
I like that.
It carved into the urinal cake.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Some cock. So this guy is like, I'm a photographer.
Of
course. I'm going to give you my card. I'm going to make you a star, kid. You're going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread. With that cock. John's cock was reportedly 13 inches, by the way.
Right.
And there were conflicting reports, but 13 is the one that came up the most.
It came.
Some people said his dick was 10 inches. Some people said it was 15.
It's not 10 inches. Because I've seen it.
It's definitely 13 inches.
It's got to be over 10 inches. Like, in my expert opinion.
So
when you see it, I feel like I would
massive.
not be like, like a cartoon character when my eyeballs pop out for a 10-inch dick. But if it's over, then I'm like, wow. Like, what am I going to do with this? And then I just spend all day thinking about it.
It's pretty fucking massive.
It's unnatural.
Right. So John started doing 8mm porn loops, which were basically these short little, it's like the original Vine. I don't know. They're these short little porn clips.
GIFs.
They're GIFs. It's like porn GIFs.
Right.
That they had in the 60s because porn was still technically illegal back then. He was also doing still photography, and he discovered, hey, I really like this porn business. I really like showing off my cock. He liked that people were fawning over him. And
I mean, guys love their cocks.
Oh my God.
They're proud of them even when it's 6 inches.
Even when they're terrible. Right. They're so proud of them. So John was like, grew this huge ego about his dick, which.
How did he not already have a huge ego about it?
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Did he not know?
I think he was measuring it.
Can you imagine being like an ambulance worker and hooking up with a guy with that big of a cock? Like, Jesus, what is that even like? Okay,
I can't imagine, and I assume, I don't know, Sharon was pretty straight-laced. It might have been her first time. She might have lost her.
She might be like, this is what every dick is
like.
Right. Can you imagine? And then the next guy she was with, that poor guy.
How disappointing for Sharon. So John was not your typical looking Adonis figure. He was very long and lanky and string beanie. He had this silly curly blonde afro. And a mustache.
He's very 70s looking.
He's super 70s looking. I mean, he looks straight out of that movie, The Blue Lagoon, except less cute.
Oh, right. Way
but
less
kind
cute.
of that look, you know, where it's like that little like blonde 70s fro on a white dude. In 1970, John met porn director Bob Chin. He initially asked Bob just to work on the set. He was like, I just want to work on the set of your porn movie.
Yeah.
I'll be a crew guy, gaffer, or whatever. Just give me a job. And Bob was like, I'm sorry, we already have all those jobs. People have been hired already.
What else you got?
So John said, oh, yeah? He took off his pants and just unfurled his dick.
Wow.
That's what Bob said.
That's quite a calling card.
That was basically his resume, was his huge cock. And Bob...
What experience do you have?
These are my credentials. And
flop it on the table. Here's my CV. Follow me on LinkedIn.
So Bob was like, what?
Yeah.
You know, it was like the spinning dicky in the cartoons.
I imagine every time someone sees his cock for the first time, it is a cartoon reaction.
I do too.
Yeah. I did a very good impression.
Her face was really hot when she did that. So Bob was like, that's it. I'm writing you a script right on the spot. He basically...
Well, this sounds like an amazing script.
he essentially wrote the script on a napkin. And this is where the very famous Johnny Wad character was created. Right. Bob created his own new character for John Holmes. And Johnny Wad, this character, was a detective. Mm-hmm. And he was always on the case.
The case of getting pussy.
The case of getting pussy. And back in the day, in 70s porn, this was like when porn was starting to break into the mainstream. And there were these elaborate plots with big production values, totally different than it is today, where it's like you just go to YouPorn and
you rent a McMansion in the valley.
Right, you rent a McMansion in the valley and you film something, whatever. But like these were actual films. I mean, they would screen in actual theaters. And John started playing this Johnny Wad character that Bob wrote for him, and it was a huge fucking hit. People loved it, and he was really responsible for helping break porn into the mainstream. And he became really like the first porn star, I would say.
Well, was Linda Lovelace before him?
No, John was before.
Oh.
Because this is 1970.
Okay.
So I think Linda Lovelace was more mid-70s. Deep Throat.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I could be wrong. I didn't look up
But they're
story.
around the same.
They're around the same time.
Right.
It was the 70s when porn started becoming hardcore, too, for the first time. So this is the first time you're seeing insertion also.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surrounded by a lot of bush.
Yeah.
So John was super into it. John loved his job. He loved the adulation he was getting from fans. He loved that people were admiring his dick. He loved that he was making money off getting to fuck chicks all the time. His first film, he made $75 a day. And he started to get some notoriety after that. Sharon, however, his wife, was not into it. She essentially felt like he was a prostitute, and she just couldn't see herself fucking him after that. She still loved him, but she lost all her horniness for him after he became a porn star. Like, I don't know where that dick's been.
Right.
I don't want to share that dick. It's probably too much dick for me anyway.
Right.
Which, let's be real, 13 inches is like probably a little, that's a lot.
Even just the tip.
Even just the tip, it's a lot. It's a lot of dick. But she still was very much connected to him on a spiritual level, but that's what she said. Those are her words. She loved him. He still loved her, I guess. And this was their arrangement, basically. Right. They were like husband and wife and living together, but not having sex.
Right.
And she was okay with that, but she just couldn't fuck him anymore. So John Holmes starred in like 100 movies, like a lot of. He was in a ton of movies, and some of the titles of his movies were Tropic of Passion, Liquid Lips, Tell Them Johnny Wad Was Here, and The Jade Pussycat. During around this time, John actually became a police informant, and he decided that he was going to go around snitching for the police on other porn productions. This is like the first thing in his story where I realized, oh my God, this guy sucks. Like, this guy's kind of a dick.
Right. And why was he doing that? Just to get his stuff more?
Yeah, he wanted to be the only porn star there was. Even though he was the most famous porn star at that point, he was the porn star, the go-to guy. But he wanted to make sure that he was the only one that had a chance to have success. So
that is a dick move.
It's
a big dick move.
It's a big dick move. John was also a pathological liar. In interviews, he would just come up with these grandiose lies, like how he got into porn in the first place. He said that he was a UCLA graduate, which he was not. And he was also, he was a pot smoker, but he did not do heavy drugs. That was not something that he did. Famous last words, right?
Right.
It wasn't until 1976 that he started doing coke. He fell in love with cocaine, specifically freebasing cocaine. And at first it was really fun. He was successful. He was partying. It was like the 70s. You know, I just imagine this montage like in Boogie Nights where it's just this big party. Everyone's making a lot of money and they're doing a ton of blow and fucking all these hot chicks. And that's how it was in the beginning. He was having the time of his life. In 1976, John met Dawn Schiller, who was a 15-year-old girl who moved into the apartment complex that Sharon Holmes was managing. John was 32. John took one look at this girl and was like, hey, how old are you?
I always feel like if you have to ask, they're probably too young. You already know that it's not going to be what you want.
You probably know the answer. So Dawn was like, I'm 15. And John said,
18? Okay.
Basically. He was like, too bad. But then he was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go after it. Because that's just the type of man that John Holmes was. So 6 months later, he starts grooming her and trying to fuck her. And Don's into it at first because he's this older guy. He's got a little notoriety. He has, drugs. They can party together. And he starts seducing her and trying to fuck her. And this one night, he takes her to Malibu and he takes her out to this really nice dinner and he's wooing her. And they go and they hang out on the beach. And then he fucks her in his van on the beach in Malibu.
Of course. Because how do you make something more 70s than fucking an underage girl in a van?
Whose name is Dawn.
Dawn. Fucking Dawn.
Right?
Dawn!
And this is where Dawn lost her virginity, was to John Holmes.
Can you imagine having that dick when you're 15?
I can't. I can't imagine having that dick now.
Me either.
But when you're 15 and, like, that's the first dick you have in you, ouch.
Yeah.
That, I feel like, he better have eaten her pussy first.
I seriously doubt that happened.
No, because as we're going to learn, John is not exactly an online male feminist. He's not the nicest guy. Things started to go downhill pretty quickly in this relationship once they started using drugs together. He was beating Dawn. He was psychologically and verbally abusive to her. But she was desperately in love with him, such is the case with a lot of abusive relationships, right, where her idea of romance was very skewed. She had Stockholm syndrome, essentially.
Right.
So this is not an uncommon thing in these kinds of relationships. And she was also a drug addict. And I'm reading this story and I'm doing my research and I'm watching all these old interviews about John and reading stuff from Dawn Schiller's book. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, this was me. This was me when I was 20 years old and living with my drug dealer. And except I wasn't even lucky enough to be fucking someone who was successful or famous. So it was like, then I really felt bad about myself.
Right. Like if you're going to fuck a loser,
right,
at least a successful loser.
I was just fucking a loser drug dealer and having this abusive relationship. At least she was whatever. Don't at me. So by 1978, John's drug use was affecting his work. He started showing up for work late. He was high. He was a total mess. He couldn't even get hard, which I feel like that's like the first rule of working in porn is like you got to just suit up, show up, get hard.
Yeah. I mean, cocaine does not mix with a porn career, even though it does kind of mix with it.
Even though it kind of mixes. Well, when you think of the 70s porn cliche, you think of lots of cocaine. But in this case, it was like he had coke dick all the time.
Right.
And they were like, dude, you got to go fuck this chick right now. You can't even get hard with your big floppy ass 13-inch cock. What the fuck? You're useless. One time on set, John just disappeared. He was there and then he was just gone. And they were like, where did he go? Did he go to lunch? Have you seen John?
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen John. Where is he? So everybody spent 5 hours looking for this guy. Ugh. And they just can't. I mean, he's holding up everybody's time. He's like really a nuisance at this point. And it wasn't until 5 hours later that they heard a scream coming from the other room, and it was a woman on set who had discovered John hiding in a closet smoking freebase, like Gollum hiding in a cave.
No dick is worth that.
No dick is worth that, ladies. It's too much trouble. So he was a full-blown drug addict at this point. His entire life was revolving around drugs. No career could stop him from doing drugs. And Bob Chin, the director, was like, look, dude, I cannot work with you anymore. He was basically the Lindsay Lohan of 70s porn at this point. He was so unreliable.
He was blackballed.
He was blackballed from the porn industry. So John stopped working in porn at that point. And because of his drug use, he was losing all of his money. I mean, cocaine is an expensive habit to get into.
I've heard.
It's very expensive. So John had to come up with some other means of income to get high, and this is when he began robbing people. And at first,
of course,
which,
that's what we all do.
That's what we all do when we're coke addicts. So he began robbing his wife, Sharon, at first, which is like
start with what you know.
Start at home. Very rude. He charged $48,000 to her credit card, which I assume.
Wait, you can charge coke?
He didn't charge the coke. I assume that he was like buying a bunch of shit and then selling it, pawning it off for money. He also would sometimes steal luggage from LAX, which I just feel like is so rude. Like,
can you even imagine how irritating that is?
It's one thing to go into somebody's home and steal a bunch of their shit, but can you imagine getting off like a really long flight and you're just like, ugh, I just want to get home. I just want to be in my bed. Like, I can't deal with fucking travel anymore.
Right.
And then your luggage is gone.
Or showing up to a vacation.
Ugh.
I mean, that's even worse.
That's really bad, too.
But then you get to go shopping, I guess.
Then you have the LA shopping montage.
Right. Shopping montage.
So Don started going on drug runs with John. At this point, he was still a total abusive dick. He basically had complete control over her. One time he kicked her in the ribs. Just hammering this home to let you guys know that he was not a nice guy. You do not need to feel sorry for him at this point, that he's not the big porn star guy.
Yeah, he's not some like farm boy with a big dick.
Right.
I mean,
he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And he also started pimping Dawn out. And Dawn essentially became a prostitute. He was super controlling. He was like the classic caricature of an abusive pimp.
Right.
With his whore. John then met a guy named Eddie Nash. Eddie was originally from Palestine, and he moved to Los Angeles and became a club magnate in Hollywood. This guy was the go-to party man in the 70s. He had a ton of clubs and bars that he owned, including gay clubs, topless bars, and various dance bars around town. And he was also a drug dealer. He was very flamboyant. You might remember a amazing portrayal of this guy in the 1997 Boogie Nights film, portrayed by Alfred Molina.
Yeah.
If you guys don't remember, if you do remember that very famous scene in Boogie Nights where Marky Mark and John C. Reilly, he's in that scene, right?
I think so.
Whatever, they go over to rob this drug dealer's house, and the drug dealer is wearing little shorts and an open robe, and he's listening to Sister Christian.
Right, it's
and
the best scene.
It's one of the best scenes in all of cinema ever, in my humble opinion. It's one of the most tense but hilarious scenes ever.
It's really good.
It's utterly chilling.
I just watched it recently, I think.
Yeah.
Just that scene.
It's so good.
So funny.
It's so good. And it just reminds me, as someone who used to live a very low budget version of this life, it just reminds me of every seedy, gross person you end up having to encounter and sort of hang out with because you're addicted to drugs, and you wind up in these situations at these people's houses who you don't know, and you're like, oh my God, how the fuck did I get here?
Right. I mean, I don't have an extreme life like yours was, but I do remember just being like at the pot dealer's house or something.
Yeah, even
where
you
have to
dealer.
Like smoke with them. You can't just leave. You have to like smoke with them first
and be nice.
Like,
and you don't want to
be
just
like, I want to fucking go.
And you can't be a dick to them, even if they're the most obnoxious person in the world, because they have what you need. So, but John and Eddie did become friends, and you know, Eddie was a total star fucker. Right. And you're not a real star fucker unless you're cool with hanging around D-listers and E-listers. Like, John Holmes essentially was. Because while he was known, he was still a porn star. He wasn't like a big movie star. It wasn't like, oh, I'm hanging out with Jack Nicholson. But I feel like that is a true star fucker. Is someone who's willing to hang out with the D-listers too.
I'm actually more into hanging out with D-listers.
Well, you get better stories.
Yeah,
I feel like they have less to lose. Eddie was definitely a monster. He also, like the Alfred Molina character, he liked to wear silky robes and boxers, and that was his uniform. His house was decorated like a very cliche drug lord from the 70s. He had the sunken-in living room. Pretty much everything in that scene in Boogie Nights was very much
Eddie Nash,
based on the real Eddie Nash.
I want a sunken living room so bad.
I had one at a house I lived in as a teenager because it was designed in the 70s, and it was pretty dope.
Yeah, it's the dopest.
It was fucking dope. So Eddie, there was also a rumor that Eddie didn't leave toilet paper around in the bathroom.
This is literally my favorite detail of anyone's life ever.
And the reason he did this is because he would offer girls Coke if they'd lick him clean after he took a shit.
Look, that is simultaneously so disgusting and so fucking crazy hot. It is so gross. I would never do it, but there's something like so maniacally evil about it that I'm almost like, wow, like
it's impressive.
It's impressive that it's so debauched. Like
it's so wrong.
I can't imagine loving something so much to do that. I'm trying to think like what would make me like literally nothing.
I don't think even in my
own life I would
moment I would have done that.
Die first.
Oh my God. So on Christmas of 1980, John pimped Dawn out to Eddie for a quarter ounce of Coke, which I feel like is so lowballing.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, I feel like the real tragedy is he didn't even get a good price for her.
He didn't get a good price for her.
He just would do it for literally the minimum amount
of money. For 2 8-balls.
Right.
That's so... I would be insulted if I was Dawn. I'd be like, I'm an underage. This is very illegal on so many levels.
You could be getting like 1,000. I mean, I don't know how much 8-balls are, but...
Well, that was probably that's like $500 10 years ago when I was
Eddie
buying
got it for cost probably.
Right. Money. I don't know how much it was in the 70s or 1980. So Dawn had had enough after that, and she ran off for a little bit to Oregon to hang out with her mom. But eventually, like the cycle goes in most abusive relationships, she would come back to John. Maybe it's going to be different this time. That's the alcoholic anthem. Around this same time, John started hanging out with the Wonderland Gang. The Wonderland Gang was a group of gang members and criminals who lived in an apartment at 8763 Wonderland Avenue in Laurel Canyon, which if you're unfamiliar with Los Angeles, which I feel like Laurel Canyon's a pretty famous area. Right. I mean, it was the neighborhood to live in the 70s if you're a musician. It was a good neighborhood.
It's a good neighborhood, but it was also sort of funky. Right. I mean, now it's very rich and expensive.
Right.
But back then, I feel like it was more of a mixture.
It was more of a mixture.
You had like Joni Mitchell and then like
the weird hippies down the block.
Yeah.
Right. So the leader of the Wonderland Gang was Ronald Lee Lanius, who was 37 years old. Ron was a Vietnam vet who was dishonorably discharged for smuggling heroin back to the U.S. inside the corpses of dead American soldiers. So this is who this guy is.
Yeah.
That's a perfect picture of the kind of moral compass that Ron Lee Lanius has. He was arrested a shit ton of times, and he had a big record. And he was also arrested in 1974 and charged for the 1973 murder of a police informant during a drug deal gone wrong. The charges were dropped when a key witness wound up dead during an unrelated shooting, which is very lucky for him. He was the leader of the gang. And also, in case we posted some pictures on our Instagram, if you want to go check him out, Ron, he looks like an alt comic that you see on the east side of LA. You'll see. Billy Deverell was 42 years old, and he was Ron's right-hand man. He was arrested 13 times for drugs in the past, and a neighbor said that he looked like a guy from a dive bar in El Paso, which is a pretty neat burn. Joy Miller, who was 46, was Billy's girlfriend, and she was the leaseholder of the Wonderland apartment. She was also a heroin user, and she had been arrested 7 times in the past. David Lind, who was 43, was a biker and a heroin addict, and he was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood in prison, which is where he met Ron, the leader.
Nice.
The other member of the gang was 32-year-old Tracy Titmouse Mccourt. They called him Titmouse, sort of as a ribbing. They didn't. Yeah. That was not a nice. That's ever. It's not a compliment to call him that. Whatever. They also had 2 associates that would hang around. One of whom was Susan Lanius, a 25-year-old wife of Ron, and Barbara Richardson, the 22-year-old girlfriend of David Lynn. So like we said before, Laurel Canyon was a pretty good neighborhood, but this house, it was a townhouse, the Wonderland apartment, and it was fucking busted. Yeah. I mean, it was like an eyesore compared to the rest of the houses in the neighborhood with these nice, rich homes. The paint was chipping and everything was rusted, but it was a secure house. You had to have a code to get in, and there was 2 pit bulls that would hang out front.
Yeah. Another sure sign of a great place.
Really good place. I'm sure the neighbors loved it, especially because it was always poppin' over at Wonderland. Just like any drug den, there was people coming in and out at all hours of the night. There was always loud music. There was always shouting. I mean, the neighbors were just like, oh, that's just the Wonderland house. I mean, I'm sure they didn't call it that, but because they lived on Wonderland too. But they were just, the neighbors expected. It wasn't out of the ordinary.
It started becoming the normal part of the noise of the neighborhood.
Right. It was really the background noise. On June 28th, 1981, the Wonderland gang called a meeting to plot their next big robbery. At this point, the gang was hard up for cash. And recently, John Holmes had botched a drug deal, and they were really pissed at him, obviously. John, you got so much blood going to that dick and none to your brain. Yeah. What's your problem? So to get back in their good graces, John suggested that they rob Eddie Nash's house.
His light bulb moments are so terrible.
He is truly the dumb criminal. And as you're going to see, there's a lot of really dumb criminals in this story.
Get ready for the dumb.
Just get ready. And John is like, yeah, Eddie loves me. He'll never suspect it. It's perfect. And John had a plan. He had a great plan. He even brought them a hand-sketched floor plan of Eddie's house.
I would love to see that sketch.
I know. I bet it was really great. So John's plan was that he was going to go to Eddie's house on the pretense of buying drugs for them. And once inside, he was going to leave a sliding glass door in the back unlocked so that the gang could later break in. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, Nash lived only 1.6 miles away in Studio City. And this was fortunate because they didn't have a lot of gas in the car. They need to get there.
They bought with change.
Hey, I've done that before. But yeah, they did not. They were like, we just got to get there. We got to get there.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, talk about your classic scraping the bottom of the barrel drug addict moment. This also happened, this was all John. You're going by John's bright idea too. So John heads over to Eddie's at around midnight with $400 and is like, yo, I want to buy some Coke. So him and Eddie, they're friends. They end up doing Coke together at his house for the next 6 hours. Mm-hmm. This was not going to be just an easy, I'm buying the Coke, I'm leaving, maybe smoke a little bit with you and then leave. No, he was there for 6 hours partying with Eddie. And Eddie at this point had been up for like 10 fucking days. Like, right. You have to understand that Eddie Nash was also super addicted to cocaine. But John did do one thing right. He made sure to leave the sliding glass door unlocked before he left.
That's amazing that he remembered.
I was honestly like, wow, I'm so impressed that he remembered that detail. I mean, that would just be the perfect if he left and was like, oh, fuck.
I know. I would imagine it might have taken like 10 times for him to
Could I have $400 more dollars to buy Coke again? So he came back to Wonderland to let the gang know that it was safe to go over there. And this was all happening, in the wee hours of Monday morning at this point, which I feel like, I just have to let everyone know, like when you're a drug addict and that's your full-time job, you don't have weekdays or weekends.
Yeah.
It's like your Monday.
Your
Monday could be your Saturday. Time literally is a flat circle. You don't know what day is the weekday and what day is the weekend. But the gang decides to head over to Eddie's pretty shortly after Monday morning at 8:30 in the morning, and they were armed with a 357 Magnum and a stolen San Francisco police detective badge because they think they're going to pull off some really complex, genius fucking heist. Like, hey, we're the police.
Yeah.
The San Francisco police.
And they're like fucking beaten down car with no gas.
This is their own Johnny Wad movie that they're all starring in. Tracy stayed in the car and the other three went in. So these three guys in the gang, they just bust in the door and they basically like, freeze, it's the cops, it's the cops.
Oh my God.
So Eddie Nash's bodyguard, Gregory Diles, was also in the house. And so they're like, fuck, we got to subdue this guy. So they start to try and subdue this huge fucking bodyguard. And in the process, the gun goes off because they're idiots. And it grazes Gregory. And it didn't shoot him, but it did burn him. Somehow they end up hogtying him and subduing him. I don't know. That just seems like a miracle, even with three of them against one. And Eddie Nash at this point is freaked the fuck out. And I imagine, like, when you've been up for days on cocaine, specifically like crack and freebase and meth, or meth, you really do think the FBI's after you. So
paranoid.
You're so paranoid, and a lot of it's due to lack of sleep. It will make anyone paranoid, but you mix in cocaine with that, and you're just fucking wrecked. So I can only imagine that Eddie is like, oh my God, it's finally happening. Yeah, like the FBI really is here.
Pissing in his sock boxers.
He really was, and there was no one to lick it up. So they're like, where's the safe? Where's the safe? And Nash takes them to the safe. And this is where they end up making off with a shit ton of money, drugs, and jewelry. They actually are getting away with it. They really think they pulled off this big heist. On the way home, the gang decides that they're going to stiff John. They're like, you know what? Fuck that big dick asshole. We're going to stiff him. But what is he going to do? He's not going to go to the police about it. He can't. They own John at that point because John has no money. He has no other friends.
Right.
So they get back to Wonderland at around 10 a.m. Ron immediately stashes $100,000 in his room, and he spreads the rest of it out on the table for everyone to pour over. They made away with 8 pounds of coke, a kilo of China white heroin, and a shit ton of Quaaludes. They really hit the jackpot here. And they decide to only give John Holmes like half an ounce of coke and $3,000 in cash. So he really got the short end of the stick here.
For once.
You got the short end of the dick. On July 1st, just 2 days after the robbery, Gregory Diles runs into John Holmes, who happened to be wearing a ring that was stolen from Eddie.
Ugh, what an idiot.
Wait,
how did he get the ring? They gave him the ring too.
I guess they gave him the ring. Like, fine, you can have this ugly pinky ring. Which I feel like you never wear your trophy in public.
Right.
Like
that would be like Ed Gein wearing his nipple belt to like the grocery store.
It's like, I know you're proud of it.
Right.
But you got to keep that shit on the
cool.
DL.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to. So John was not the best of criminals. So Gregory Diles runs into him. He sees him wearing his boss Eddie Nash's ring. He's like,
love
hey.
that they run into each other. Like, just picturing that scene is so stupid.
So stupid. I just imagine him seeing the ring and being like, I'd know that ugly fucking ring anywhere.
Yeah.
So he was fucking like, you're coming with me. And he drags Holmes down to Nash's house where Eddie was furiously smoking coke. I mean, he was pissed. 2 of Eddie's customers were already inside, one of whom was Scott Thorson, who was Liberace's boyfriend. Of course, because how much more 1981 can this story already get? So Nash is like, all right, Scott, get the fuck out of the room. I need to talk to this fucking asshole. And Gregory and Eddie Nash just start beating the shit out of John. And Thorson overhears everything in the next room. And Nash is threatening Holmes, like, I'm going to kill your wife. I'm going to kill your family if you don't get all my shit back. So John is pretty much terrified and at this guy's mercy at this point. At 3 a.m., July 1st, 1981, a group of unidentified men and, by his own account, John Holmes, broke into the Wonderland house armed with metal pipes and hammers. Lynn's 22-year-old girlfriend, Barbara Richardson, was sleeping downstairs, and she was killed first. She was bludgeoned to death. Next, the killers beat Ron Launius and his wife, Susan. Ron died of his injuries, but Susan was left barely clinging to life. Then the killers went upstairs and killed Billy Deverell and Joy Miller. Neither David Lynn nor Tracy Mccourt were at the house during the attack. Lynn happened to be holed up in a motel room with a male prostitute getting high, which I just feel like if I was his girlfriend and I was at the house and he wasn't, I'd be like, hey, like, you were supposed to be here. I don't even live here.
Right. How unfair.
I get my ass fucking killed. And you're getting your dick sucked by a prostitute. That's unfair.
And he probably has zero guilt about it.
Oh, I'm sure. He was like, woof.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a close one.
See? Told you getting my dick sucked by a prostitute and getting high was a good idea.
After the murders, John Holmes fled to Sharon's house because he's still married to his wife at this point.
And Dawn was like, hey.
Right. I mean, like, why did
like when shit really goes down.
You go back to your wife?
The adult?
And he's covered in blood. And Sharon sees him walk through the door covered in blood, but doesn't notice any cuts on him. So she's like, what did you just do?
Right.
What the fuck is going on?
I just came blood.
And I just want everyone to know that this is Sharon's own account. Like, why would she lie about this?
Right.
This is Sharon recalling this many years later. And she said that she drew him a bath and he was sobbing in the bath, just confessing to her everything that had just gone down with the murder and the robbery. And as soon as he's done his bath, he just gets up and bounces.
Ugh.
Which I'm like, what an emotional vampire.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
This guy's a total narcissist, in case you couldn't have gathered at this point. So then he bounces and he goes to a motel room where Dawn is hiding out.
Ugh.
So he does go to Dawn to use her up emotionally too at that point and for shelter. John ends up falling asleep, and while he's sleeping, he starts talking. And he's talking in his sleep about blood and murder. And this is Dawn said this in interviews and in her book. Like, this is her own account. This isn't just a rumor that he was talking in his sleep. And this really freaked her out, as it should, if you're sleeping next to someone and they're like, there's so much blood.
Yeah.
Murder. But she had also just seen a report on the news about the murder at Wonderland. And she vaguely knew the house and vaguely knew these people just from going on drug runs before with John.
Right.
So she's like, she doesn't take a rocket scientist to put two and two together that your idiot big dick boyfriend is probably involved or probably did this.
Right.
The police were never called during the Wonderland attack because the neighbors were so used to screaming and partying coming from the house. You know, it was like just another night to them. They wouldn't have been able to tell that people were getting beat to death. They're like, ugh, shut up.
Yeah,
you know, they're probably like, well, you guys shut up. And people are fucking
murdered.
dying. Right. But it didn't sound any different than it did on a Tuesday or a Friday.
Just any given day.
Yeah. It wasn't until 4 p.m. on July 1st that furniture movers heard moaning coming from the house. It was Susan, still barely alive.
Oh. How many days was she there?
Just like the day.
Oh, okay.
Basically.
So it was just
yeah. Because the attack happened at 3 a.m. and this was 4 p.m.
Okay.
Right. So Susan suffered from amnesia due to the attack. So which sucks, she could barely remember anything that happened. So it wasn't like she was going to be a key witness in the attack. When police got to the scene, they said that it was the most gruesome crime scene that they had seen since the Tate LaBianca murders. There were even reports of policemen saying that it looked like someone had gone around the house just splashing buckets of blood. I mean, there was blood everywhere. I don't know. You can actually see
there's crime
footage.
Scene,
There's crime scene footage online, and there's blood on the ceiling. There's blood on the walls. There's blood on the floor. Were
bludgeoned to death. I mean, that's so brutal. Like,
it's so brutal, and you know, even their faces, they were unrecognizable. and I could only stomach watching just like brief clips of the crime scene footage. I'm a little queasy when it comes to that, of if I'm seeing something real like that. But this was a massacre. Like, this was like something definitely out of a horror movie. It was pretty fucking bad. So when David Lynn found out about the murders, he quickly flipped, and he's like, fuck, I'm going to go down for this. I'm just going to inform the police what I know.
Yeah.
Get a deal. David goes to the police, and he's like, I know who did this. I know who did this. And he told them everything. He told them all about the robbery at Eddie Nash's house, and he told them about Eddie Nash's connection to John Holmes. So John was the link between Eddie Nash and the Wonderland gang. So police busted into the motel room where John and Dawn were staying. And John was arrested, but he was bailed out the next day by Sharon. Sharon needs Al-Anon. Poor fucking Sharon. So he gets busted out by Sharon. And John had said to the police, look, I'll talk to you guys. I'll tell you guys what you need to know, but I need protective custody for myself, for Dawn, and for Sharon. So the police agreed to that, and they went to the Bonaventure Hotel in downtown LA, where they holed up there, 3 of them with the police. And John is basically just stringing their asses along. He's not giving them any useful information. He's just trying to like cool off for the next 5 days. And after 5 days, they got sick of his shit and they let him go. So Holmes and Dawn were like, we need to get the fuck out of LA before we have to deal with the cops anymore. And being the fucking genius that John Holmes is, he hatches a genius plan to meet up with Eddie Nash one more time because he thinks he could squeeze some more money out of this guy. He wasn't even going to rob him again. He was stupid enough to say, no, I'm just going to call him up and ask him for some money.
Right.
And I'm sure Dawn was like, are you fucking idiot?
Yeah.
Like, we have to leave right now. But he's like, no, honey, I got a plan. And we all know John's plans are great plans. So his plan was that he was going to blackmail him. He said that he had info on Eddie and he was going to spread it around town if he didn't give him $3,000. And miraculously, Eddie didn't murder his ass and he actually walked away with $1,500. I don't know what he said to Eddie. I don't know how that worked, but he walked away with $1,500. So Dawn and John, they went on the run. Their first stop was in Las Vegas, where John is like, hold on, honey, I got to stop in at this casino and gamble.
Right.
John comes right out of the casino 10 minutes later, and he's like, there's a fucking hitman here. I got to go. This was probably a paranoid delusion, but you would be paranoid too.
Of course.
If you were involved in these murders and you...
I mean, it's probably good because he didn't lose all the money.
No.
Yeah.
Which... that would have been the other perfect thing that made sense with John Holmes. That he goes in, he loses $1,500, and then he ends up owing some thug that he fucking borrows money. Yeah. So they end up going to Montana, which is where Dawn's sister is, and they stay with her for a little while. But when they got word that the FBI had showed up at his mom's place in Ohio, they were like, we got to get out of this part of the U.S. So they head to Florida because
of course,
that's where you go to die. It's Florida. Police, I also want to note that police had also found a bloody palm print belonging to John at the scene. Okay. So it was not looking good for John. He had a lot on him. So Dawn and John, when they get to Florida, they end up staying at this really gross crack motel. It's nothing but the best for Dawn. John was working as a carpenter and Dawn was working as a maid. And John was like, fuck, you're going to need to start hooking again because we're not making enough money. And this ended up being the final straw for Dawn. She was fucking serious this time. She's like, you know what? Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. And he could do it.
And he could probably fuck his own asshole if he wanted to.
If he could bend that way.
With that dick. I mean, I think he could just bend his dick down and stick it into his asshole, probably. It was so big.
I guess. I don't know. I'm not like a physicist.
You're a scientist, not a
physicist. I'm just a big scientist.
So Dawn was fucking officially done. So she called her brother and told him everything that had been going on. And he immediately flew down to Florida, where they contacted the police and told them where John was. And that was the last time that Dawn would ever see him. John was arrested and taken back to LA, where he was charged with murder. The Holmes trial began in 1982. And this was the first time in American judicial history that a tape was admitted as evidence. This was the crime scene footage tape that I'd referred to before. Right. This tape was actually used in the trial as evidence. John, however, ended up getting acquitted because there wasn't enough evidence against him. So the police ended up searching Nash's home, and they found $1 million worth of cocaine and also several stolen items that were from the Wonderland house. And at one point during the 80s, Nash would spend 2 years in prison for drug charges, but he never did time for the murder. He was acquitted for that, as was his bodyguard, Gregory Diles. So what's so crazy about this is that this murder is still technically unsolved.
But it seems quite clear what happened. I mean,
right. It's pretty fucking obvious.
How did they not have evidence? I mean, my God.
I don't know. It's like, it feels like the police were just as dumb as the criminals.
Well, and the crime scene was so messy.
Right.
Maybe.
It's true.
I don't know.
There just wasn't enough evidence.
And maybe no one cared enough about the victims, right?
Right. They're like, good riddance. They sucked. So this was not a turning point for John Holmes to become a better person, to have a come to Jesus moment.
He never learned
to go to AA, to get really into community service. No, he was going to continue to be a big old shithead. John ended up getting back into porn and having a little bit of a comeback. I mean, he was still like, that washed up porn star guy, but he was making movies. He started making movies again in the 80s. He even made another Johnny Wad film.
He had a comeback. I picture the advertising on the VHS cassettes, like CUMBACK.
Right. John Holmes and his comeback. He'll come on her back too.
I mean, that's the level of pun we're talking about with porn.
But every porn has to have a good pun in it.
Right.
So in 1986, John had contracted AIDS, and he knew about it. This wasn't like, we found out after the fact that he had AIDS. No, he knew that he had AIDS. And so basically everyone in LA was like, don't fuck that guy anymore. Yeah. They found out. He was sort of like not welcome around porn sets anymore because he has AIDS, and he's like, what?
Yeah. I mean, that seems pretty standard.
Yeah. And they weren't using protection, so he flies to Italy, and he's going to start a porn career there. And he does. And he went to Italy, and he knowingly infected like dozens of people while he was there. Or
he potentially infected, right?
Potentially infected, but he knowingly...
He did it knowingly.
He fucked them raw, knowing that he had AIDS. Sorry, to put it bluntly.
I mean, no, yeah. Do you know, though, actually anyone who contracted AIDS from him or HIV?
I don't, but there's also probably was people
who didn't know,
and they died, or they weren't famous enough to where we know, or they were random. Right. So he was a piece of shit till the end.
All right.
He did not stop.
I mean, he's consistent.
He was so consistent with being a piece of shit. He ended up dying of AIDS in 1988. And that's the story of John Holmes. And I was so blown away researching this story because my knowledge of John Holmes, I knew what he looked like, I knew who he was, but my knowledge of him really extended to the Dirk Diggler character in Boogie Nights.
Yeah, which is a more wholesome or typical drug addict, like someone who got into drugs but wasn't necessarily
wasn't a sociopath or a fucking evil person. And it's like, if you've in Boogie Nights, the John Holmes character is played by Marky Mark, super hot in that movie. Yeah. And he is this lovable doofy drug addict guy. He hangs out with Philip C. Hoffman and John C. Reilly. So he's a
dork.
He's a dork, and he's not a bad guy. He's not.
He just gets into situations.
He makes a lot of really bad choices because he's a drug addict.
Yeah.
And he's So But when I was reading this stuff about John Holmes, like my opinion of him really changed because I didn't know
what a horrible piece of shit he was.
Yeah, I just had this vague story of him that like, oh, he also got into some really bad situations and made some really bad choices.
Yeah. I mean, I knew he died of AIDS and I knew his porn career and I knew he was involved in these murders, but I think my impression was that he was innocently involved somehow. Like just the wrong place, wrong time type of thing.
That's what I always believed too, but that's also because I've never seen the Wonderland movie. I've only seen Boogie Nights.
Yes. I mean, I didn't see that movie either.
Right.
But I don't even know if it's good.
I don't know if it's good or not. So yeah, that's cool. John Holmes. Anyway.
That was
that good?
Interesting. Yeah, I liked it.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Mo taters, Mom.